David Barton, an honorable man, a true American historian, and really, honestly, I think the man who has single-handedly saved this country from darkness. At least me. I mean, the stuff that he has taught me, I didn't know, and no one except David could have taught this stuff because he teaches it in a very entertaining way, keeps you engaged, but also he's got all of the documents. So, somebody argues with him, he's like, oh, I'll tell you something else about Thomas Jefferson. He's like, really? Because here it is in his own handwriting. Thomas Jefferson is his latest book, Jefferson Lies. No, I'm sorry, The Jefferson Lies, exposing the myths you've always believed about Thomas Jefferson. And it is out in bookstores now.
Yeah, like he had sex with his slave and has all kinds of descendants from Sally Hemings.
Oh, this one's such a great one. David, welcome to the program.
Hey, Glenn, good to be with you, sir.
Let's try to go through as many of these as we can. Do the Sally Hemings thing.
Sally Hemings didn't happen. First off, it's really hard to get DNA testing. When to do DNA testing, you have, in a later generation, you have to have a male descendant.
And the reason that's important, David, is because it was 1998 when they supposedly did this DNA test that
November 1998.
Yeah, that proved that it was Thomas Jefferson's child or his lineage, his line. And it did nothing of the sort.
It did nothing of the sort. As a matter of fact, they retracted the story 6 weeks later. Nobody carried the retraction. But you can't prove it was impossible to prove Jefferson did it because he has no male descendants. That's where you have to get the DNA as male descendants. Plus, on top of that, the guy who did the testing said, by the way, we found out that in Thomas Woodson, the one that everybody believed for 200 years was father of Thomas Jefferson, there's not a single Jefferson DNA, not only from Thomas, but nobody in the entire Jefferson clan. So it kind of blew out 200 years of history, but nobody covered the retraction of that DNA story that ran in November of 1998.
So it wasn't, not only was it not Thomas Jefferson, because the story you also sometimes hear that goes associated with this is that it was maybe one of his relatives, one of 27 different Jefferson men. That's not even true?
Not even true. They did find that in the fourth child there was some Jefferson DNA, not Thomas Jefferson's DNA, but that's been known for a while, too, because it's known for 200 years that Thomas Jefferson's younger brother, Randolph, had a relationship at that point back with some of the slaves. So we can point to Jefferson's younger brother.
Hang on
can't point to Jefferson.
I know you're a polite man, but let's not call Randolph's a time with the slaves a relationship.
Yeah, there you go.
I think he had sex with slaves.
There's too much euphemism there.
Yeah, there is. Well, he had a relationship. They would go out for dinner and see a movie from time to time. No, I don't think so. Okay. Here's the story that honestly, David, I think I have had wrong, and that is Jefferson rewriting the scripture. He wrote or didn't write. He took I think it's 4 different languages and cut the Bible up. And I've always heard that he took out what he kind of believed were like the magic tricks of Jesus, and he just went to the teachings of Jesus, and he called them Jesus of Nazareth. And it was just the teachings.
Well, there's 2 of them. There's one he did in 1804 at the White House. The one you're mentioning there is 1820. They're both called the Jefferson Bible, and when people tell me about Jefferson Bible, I always ask them which one you're talking about, and they don't have a clue. They didn't know there was 2. So the first one in 1804, he took 2 Bibles in the White House, and he had been working already, by the way, federally funding missionaries to the Indians, Christian missionaries. And in 1804, he read a sermon from a guy in Scotland that said one of the best ways to share Christianity with the Indians is to make a really simple abridged gospel, which they use all the time for young believers. They take the 4 Gospels and cut it down into the life of Jesus. And so that's what he did. He went through and cut out the life and the teachings of Jesus out of the 4 Gospels, made it one, gave it to his missionary friends and said, look, this has the whole life of Jesus in it. Go ahead and present this. It'll be cheaper to print than the entire Bible, and you can get the whole message of Jesus. And so they did. And people tell me, well, he cut all the miracles out. I go, have you ever read it? Well, no, I've never read it. Well, how do you know it's cut out? Well, everybody tells me this. No, you read that, it has Jairus' daughter being raised from, it has raisings from the dead, it has healing the sick, has casting out demons, cleansing the lepers, has Jesus the Son of God, has the second coming, has heaven and hell and angels. All that stuff they told us was cut out that Jefferson disagreed with. The other one that you mentioned, Glenn, is one they did in 1820, and he started that when he was president, and he said, so many of the problems that we have are moral problems. If we could simply figure out how to get morality right, would be good. And so he read the moral teachings of more than 30 philosophers, from Seneca to Plato to Aristotle, and he said, Jesus has got the best moral teachings of anybody out there. So he went through and pulled 50 of the moral teachings of Jesus out and put it in a book called The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Said if we lived by these morals, we would have a perfect nation. And so that wasn't even supposed to be about Jesus' teachings. It's just his morals. And by the way, it's filled with miracles too. So the whole nonsense that he cut out all the stuff he disagreed with, blatantly wrong in both cases.
Well, but he was a deist.
That's amazing.
He was a deist.
That's amazing. So, okay, so give me the, I think we all know it, but just because it's in here and it's so dead on, the separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state was a quote that he was using that had been, at the time he used it, 250 years in existence. And it came because starting back in 371 A.D., the state took over the church. And for the next 1,200 years, it wasn't the church taking over the state. The state took over the church, says, here's the doctrines, here's what you guys will teach, here's what you do, here's what you enforce. We're decreeing the doctrines. We have state-established churches. The church is now an arm of the state. And when Henry VIII did that in England, he said, I want a divorce. And the church said, you can't get a divorce. Church doesn't, that's not biblical. He said, well, I'll just start my own church, give myself a divorce. At that point, one of the dissenters, which they're the guys that came to America, he said, no, there's got to be separation of church and commonwealth. You got to get the government out from telling what the doctrines are going to be. And that was the phrase that became church and state. So it was brought to America by the dissenters. The pastor of the Pilgrims got killed because he said Queen Elizabeth should not be the head of the church and the head of the state. So for saying that, they killed the pastor of the Pilgrims. John Robinson became their pastor. They came to America. They're big in separation church and state, which meant keep the government from telling us what we can and can't do with our faith. So when Jefferson used that, it was in reference to a letter where they wrote him and said, we're in Connecticut and we're scared to death. The government's going to try to regulate our religious expression. And Jefferson wrote back January 1st, 1802, said, no. There's a wall of separation between church and state. The government will never stop your religious activities. So for 150 years, every single time the federal courts used separation church and state, it was to keep activities in public, not to take them out. 1947, the Supreme Court said, well, we think Jefferson screwed it up. It should be the other way around. So now Jefferson gets blamed with what the Supreme Court came up with in 47. But when you look at Jefferson's life, he was constantly putting religious expressions in public. He started a church in the U.S. Capitol. He sent missionaries to the Indians at federal expense. Jefferson was not a secularist in any way, shape, fashion, or form.
He also printed the first Koran.
Yeah.
With government money.
He did, which is a fun story to show how that was not a religion you want anywhere close, because he had the first war against Islamic terrorism. He spent 5 years of sending troops to fight Islamic terrorists, because at that point, before he sent troops, we were spending 20% of the federal budget every year in trying to deal with Islamic terrorism. So the first war on terror was under Jefferson, and they printed the Quran to say, you got to see what these folks believe.
Yeah, he brought it over.
This war.
He brought it over so he could read it, because he wanted to know, what is it that they're following? I don't understand their teachings. I don't understand their religion. He brought it over, had it brought over. He read it, and then there's a disclaimer at the beginning of his Quran, the one that Keith Ellison put his hand on to take the oath of office. The first page says, basically, warning. This is a perversion, isn't it? Something like that?
Yeah, it tells the reader, it says, reader, you will wonder at the absurdities contained herein. And they did that because we just spent all this money and lost all these lives fighting against terrorism. And Jefferson was the first diplomat ever sent by America. He was one of the first three sent to negotiate with Islamic terrorists. And so when he was there, after he had a relationship with one of the diplomats for 2 years, and said, okay, talk to me bluntly here. Why are you guys attacking America? We've never done anything to you. And the diplomat said, well, it's because the Quran requires us to. You guys are infidels. We're supposed to make war on you. That's how we get to heaven. And Jefferson's like, no, you got to be kidding. So he went out and bought a Quran, read the Quran, said, it's there. You got to see this. You actually go to heaven for killing people. And so that's where you get this first Quran printed in 1806 at the end of the First War on Terror. And that Quran printed in 1806 is what contains that little disclaimer. Said, reader, you're going to be amazed at the absurdities in this. And that was so that everyone would know why we just had 5 years of war against Islamic terrorism.
I've got about a minute, David. Why did you write this book?
because there is so much out there with Jefferson that is so backward. Even the secular guys that say, separation church and state. If Mikey Weinstein, who heads the military religious freedom thing, who's an atheist who gets religion out of the military, if he just stepped up and said, I as an atheist want this gone, we'd laugh at him. He steps up and says, Thomas Jefferson wants this gone, we say, oh, we better think about this. We don't want to undermine the foundation of the country. And so Jefferson gets invoked in ways he would absolutely abhor, and that's why I felt like it's really important for people to know who Jefferson really is so they won't buy into bad agendas.
If you've never read a David Barton book, you have never read a history book. David is one of the best writers. He is, I think, one of the best, if not the best historian in America. He is doing everything he can to write, to turn history back and write it and put it back to where it was and tell the truth, good and bad. Thomas Jefferson is such an important figure. This is a watershed book that you need to equip yourself with and equip your family and your children with so they know the truth about Jefferson. It is The Jefferson Lies, exposing the myths you've always believed about Thomas Jefferson. It's in bookstores everywhere. It's available on Amazon.com. And David, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Good to be with you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Be nice if you come to the table prepared for once, with a little bit of information.
Don't you wish you had his brain?
Oh, it's amazing.
I mean, he's
amazing every time.
Every time. And I caught myself one episode here recently with him, and I was on TV, and I asked him something completely out of the blue about a completely unrelated, topic. And I would have never done that to anybody. I don't want to stick anybody out and make them look stupid.
Yeah, that's not going to happen with him.
Right, and I didn't even realize. I didn't even realize until he started answering it. I thought to myself, "My gosh, I would never have asked that question of anybody else that I respected because I wouldn't want them to look stupid and say, I don't even know what you're talking about."
Mm-hmm.
And he knew it inside and out. And he talked for like 10 minutes after it. It's incredible. He's really an incredible guy. David Barton, The Jefferson Lies. Grab it in bookstores everywhere.